Last week, we focused on the mind-spirit relationships and ways to invest in it. I left us with a little homework to find one mind-spirit activity that we could put into practice that had the potential to lead to a long-term habit. Today, I want to build on this by diving deeper into our spirit side. Our spiritual side is far more intricate than we realize. I've been meditating on this over the last week, and I actually discovered a few things that I particularly have fallen away from that are radically impacting my daily life in negative ways. Perhaps this speaks to you also. If so, go ahead and take that deep sigh of relief because we're about to get real about our spiritual side. There are many ways to nurture our spiritual existence. In today's episode, we'll peel back the layers of our spiritual side to examine its dimensionality, and we'll break down a few ways to nurture it to improve our total health. Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence but feel stuck in a fog of uncertainty? If you're ready to gain clarity on your goals and cut yourself free from the fear, self-doubt, and worry holding you back, this show is for you. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and clarity coach. I help women like you restore their inner worlds and get clear on their goals to confidently fulfill their greatest desires. Ready to restore your inner warrior? Then turn off those distractions and tune in to this next episode. So, what is the spirit side of our existence? Well, at a very basic level, we are one part body, one part mind or soul, and one part spirit. And we've been breaking this down over the last few episodes, but in this episode, like I said, I really want to drill deeper into our spirit self. You've probably heard me talk about doing daily devotions in the Book of Awakening by Jeff Nebo. And one of the days actually dived into this mind and spirit connection, and it really spoke to me, and something jumped out at me, which was, the spirit cannot run from the truth. The spirit is the place that is our truth. And it got me thinking about a lot of different ways that on the mind side, we do tend to create these places that are disassociated with reality in order to just survive. Or maybe we just don't want to deal with particular things, so we kind of put them out of our mind, pretend they don't exist. But on the spirit side, it can't ignore the truth. It can't run from the truth. It is that place inside of us that grounds us to the truth. It's like our one true north. It's our North Star that points to the truth. And I thought, what a great way to really build this week's message on how the spirit is this place of truth for us. And when I really think about what is the spirit inside of us, I think of it as this trifold cord. It is one part human nature, and that includes our organic connection to nature itself. Another strand is our personality that shapes over time. And then the third strand is our moral fiber. So if you broke it down into what could you name or title these three cords, it would be nature, nurture, and power source. I recently was having a conversation about this last episode with some spiritual individuals and talking to them about what I wanted to talk about this episode. And the conversation got really, really interesting because right away, it just kept building on scripture in the word. And it became very religious feeling right away for me. And I felt like, God, there are so many parts that we're missing about our spiritual existence and our spiritual self. We're not possessed. We are an existence. We are a being with three distinct parts that make up one whole. So this Trinity makes us up. And while those of us who accept specific faith, we inhabit a divine spiritual presence inside of us, that's one part of that moral fiber thread. It's not, again, a possession. It is something that is another thread that is into that, and it's a very significant thread on that side of our existence, yes. I think the challenge here, though, is to stop thinking of it only from our religious spiritual side, because, maybe you're like I am, I was really, really hurt, not by one church, but by several churches, and the people within the church. So I've had to put a lot of time in healing those areas and also undoing a lot of damage, not just to, my emotions that were kind of traumatized in these experiences, but also bad practices and bad information. And so, I think about that when I think about a message like this, in all of the different ways that we have to nurture and build our spiritual self. And it's a lifetime journey. And so, yes, for me, I am a spiritual person who gets into biblical texts and devotions. And there is a point to understanding and applying scripture and the spiritual principles to our lives, and to find and follow that thread of meaning all the way through the entire passage, or maybe the entire library of books that has that same recurrent theme and recurrent message going through it. We're not supposed to just take one thing out and say, okay, this is the truth, the only truth, because it says it, because everything in those passages is interpretive. And that is exactly how the Bible, if we're talking about biblical scriptures, was written. It was written for us to have to engage and make meaning with those things. And this is where we find the truth in the real message. And it's complicated, but I don't want to spend the message talking about that, because I want to dive into all of the ways that make up this one part that's called spirit. This is where we're grounded to reality, yes. And the threads that weave our spirit self together are many. So there are many practices and investments to consider when nurturing our spirit. Mindfulness is one. You've heard me talk about that. We talked about that last episode. Meditation, journaling, prayer, listening to music, singing music, breath work. Those are all intentional things. Something that I did this week, so my homework was to bring in music that was very particular to frequency and to getting me on the right frequency. And it was fascinating. And I'm still researching it, so I'm not ready to talk about it with you yet today. But it was fascinating to do this frequency work and see how it is changing my everyday life and how it is enhancing specific things. There's prayers, reading spiritual and devotional texts, like I mentioned. There's also religious traditions or other types of sacred traditions or rituals that you can practice. And then there's the nature connections, grounding, walks, hikes, runs, biking, anything outside in nature, gardening, really getting your hands in the dirt and really feeling it, which is another form of grounding. Immersions in bodies of water is incredible. And yoga is another example. One of the things you may remember me mentioning in prior episodes is how I try to incorporate several of these acts into one time. So into one activity. So several of these things into one activity. And it's a way for me to reap all of these benefits by doing things that work well in unity together. So I'm not suggesting that you try to multitask and do things that are requiring the same parts of your brain and the same parts of your spirit and body to focus on one thing to execute it well. And then you're like, I'm giving 25% to this and then 75% to this, and you start to mess around with that. I'm saying, like, for instance, if you're listening to music while you're on a walk or a hike, and I only put one side in so that I can also hear nature. And I also will do different breathing exercises. For instance, when I'm walking, running, or even I do simulated jogging or laps in the pool, and I don't immerse my head in the water. And so I do different breathing activities so that I'm getting the benefits of the exercise, but I'm also getting this really cool spiritual type of exercise in as well. And so, I might even add more layers and more layers of that to see like how many things I can do. So like if I do grounding, for instance, then I might also be meditating, and maybe I'm praying on something specific, or maybe I'm just like, let me just get alone with my thoughts. Let's just get alone with my thoughts. And I'm also, like I mentioned in other episodes, I live in a very wetlands area. I have a natural marsh in my backyard. And so I have this beautiful backdrop of all these really amazing, just this amazing wildlife, this incredible ecosystem. And so I'm also alone in nature while I'm doing these particular things. And, it's incredible. And something that I found recently is I obviously, I suffer from seasonal depression, and I know a lot of people suffer from that. And so January and February are really tough for me. By the time I get to February, like we're at the end of February now, I'm like, oh my God, like, please make it stop. And I was, again, being mindful this week of, is it just the weather? Because I am a very outdoorsy kind of a person. I even take my office outside in the summer and spend my time, whether I'm in the sun, in the shade, outside with nature. And I do this every single day. So when it rains, I'm kind of bummed out because then I'm stuck in the house. And I thought maybe it was just because the weather was cold. And as I'm getting older, I'm starting to hate winter. I used to like it. I used to ski, downhill, cross country. I would even run all winter outside. And snowmobile. We used to go on these big snowmobile trips. We would go up north to the UP where it is extremely cold. And I would be out there all day in the snow. And now I'm like, every time I have to leave the house, I'm like, do I really have to go out in the cold? And so I thought that maybe it was just the weather and all those things. But as I was being mindful and meditating and researching on some practices that I could bring into my life and thinking about the spiritual connections that I want to talk to you about today, I realized that a lot of the things that I just shared with you are things that I do really well spring, summer, and fall. And once the weather changes, I am completely disconnected from those things. Of course, my mental health and my spiritual health have taken a major decline and do every single year.
So I just want to hop in here for a moment and mention that I'm now accepting one-on-one coaching clients. So if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a session with me today. Find a link to book your session in the show notes below.
It wasn't until I really started meditating on all these things that I'm talking to you guys about every week that I realized, this spirit side is so easily neglected in our lives, and we so easily dismiss it and think, as long as I'm doing this one thing, like my husband and I trying to get back into our religious spiritual practices and, spending time with other people and doing, having great fellowship with other individuals and getting back to church and those types of things. I thought that one act, because we think spiritual, spirit, that's the thing. But then I started thinking about all this stuff that I'm sharing with you, and I realized we are far more complicated when it comes to this spirit side and how that spirit side affects our physical health and also affects our mental health, and how the more ungrounded I have become in this spiritual side. And I realized that it has impacted like my physical activities, my physical outlets, for instance, because I can't bring as many of those things together that feed me spiritually. I'm less likely to do those physical activities, which is taking a toll on my physical health and is also taking a toll on some of those hormones and chemicals that I just normally get released when I'm very active the other 3 seasons of the year. And I was like, wow, this is kind of blowing my mind because it's the science of it. And the science is very real. And if we pay attention and we really are really good stewards of these parts of our lives, we can kind of channel in to like, what is going on? What is causing this negative stuff? And so that was the interesting thing that was happening this week. And the one thing that I changed a few things, but I was really intentional about the frequency music. And I experimented with different types of music. Like if you're just thinking about like spa sounds or nature sounds and classical music, I experimented with different things. And I noticed some really interesting things along the way, but I'm going to, again, spend some more time with that and figure out, is there a better setting for me to play this type of sound? Is there a better setting for me to do this type of thing? And see how it enhances my everyday existence and see how it enhances not just in the moment, but you have to think about like the after effects of these activities. How do we feel 5 minutes later? It's like if you are a runner, I'm going to use running because running is a great example. Like I love the endorphins I get from running, and my health has been really bad. So I've had to cut down on my running. I'm actually on rest right now. I'm not allowed to run. I haven't been for a run since December. I'm going out of my mind, but that's okay because it's never coming back into my life because I'm not going to accept that. It's just something that I can't do right now because I'm healing something that happened to my knee. So now I'm like, okay, I know what it feels like to do the run. I don't love to run. I have a friend who's always like, well, I know you love to run. No, buddy, I haven't loved to run since I was in high school, winning gold medals at track events. I Love how I feel after I run. Sometimes I do love the whole experience. I'm out there, the music's great, the atmosphere's great. I love running like when it's sprinkling rain, for instance, and it's in the summer. Don't ask me why, but I absolutely love that. So are there moments where I'm just like, oh my God, everything in the universe is all lining up and I'm just thriving, living my best life? Yes, I'm not going to lie to you. Like that happens. But most of the time, I have to be like, girl, get your butt changed, get your shoes on, go out for the run because I want what comes after. I want those endorphins and I also want the physical benefits. I want to, I want to reap those physical benefits, which isn't just like having better physical appearance. It's the strength. Like as we get older, we lose that strength and it becomes very precious to us. And it's the strength and it's what happens over that, 5 minutes later when my heartbeat starts to regulate at the right rate again. And then I start to feel that release and I just feel better, right? It's like, you did a potion and you just feel better. And then it's the day after and 2 days after, and it lasts me a couple of days. And so I learned that about myself. My kids even learned it about me because if I started to get really cranky when I was raising them, they would say, Mom, when was the last time you went for a run? Go for a run. Because they would know, like they were smart enough to recognize Mom is in such a better mood. She's far easier to get along with. Like they really at a basic level tuned into that and recognized that. So we can tune in far better when we think about that as an example to the effects. Sometimes we just aren't paying attention. We're going through the motions or we are in survival mode. I know right now I'm trying to do too many things at once, doing this podcast, working with some coaches. I'm working on my PhD, which is completely neglected right now. Right now I'm in the final days of production for the magazine that I have. I have an art and literature journal that comes out twice a year, and that is in final production. And I'm also meeting with my accountant this week, so I have to get all of our tax prep done before, the middle of the week. And it's just like a lot of things going on. And it's not like it's always that way in my life, but right now the pressure's on. And so it's very easy if we live a high-paced life like that to not be paying attention to those things and our body and spirit telling us and our mind telling us, hey, you're neglecting this. And so we ignore it, like the pain after you get a paper cut, you ignore it. And then someone says, you're gushing blood. And you go, really? Because you're blocking it out and you're prioritizing other things. So we don't want that to happen in our spiritual life where we're blocking it out and we don't notice it until it's like this, infected thing that now needs to be, you have to have your finger amputated because it's completely infected and it's full of gangrene at this point. And you're like, what? Like I was so busy and preoccupied. So we don't want to experience spiritual amputations in our life either. And there's one more area that I didn't get into yet that I want to also bring in here, which is being in the service of others. We don't talk about that a lot when we think about our spiritual self and our spiritual practices. But actually, when we think about purpose, which is something this podcast is founded on, when we cannot look at functioning in our purpose and functioning in our passion if we don't talk about being in the service of others. So I know we have many different purposes in our lives. When we think about specific purposes that rely on our skills and our talents, it comes back to being in the service of others. Purpose actually is directly connected to being in the service of others. And so there are ways that we can be in the service of others. We can volunteer our time. We can take care of the needs of other individuals and our domestic roles. So a lot of times we think we have to be so intentional about like, oh, I've got to volunteer here, I've got to volunteer there. I know back 15 years ago, before I went back to college to retrain, I was so overcommitted to volunteering. I was volunteering in the church on so many capacities. I couldn't walk into that building without somebody running to me in distress because someone else didn't show up and someone else is sick and can you step in? And I was constantly stepping in. There wasn't a time where I could just go and sit at the feet of the cross and just be like, okay, pour into me now. I became a workhorse there. And then there was also in the community itself, like I was running different programs at the school and there were just a lot of things that I was volunteering for. And so I was volunteering on top of volunteering with the side of volunteering. When I went back to school, I was like, oh my gosh, like all of this has to go because I need to focus on my education, but I also have to run my household. And my kids were still small enough to where they were relying on me. I had to still make sure that their needs were met, that they were driven around where they needed to be and picked up where they needed to be, and that they ate and that they were clean and that, their clothes were clean and all those different things. And as I was thinking about talking to you today about the spirit side and being in the service of others, I was thinking about how we don't recognize our domestic roles as something that is definitely in this category. And it got me thinking about something too, where it's, our mindset about some of those things also. Like, for instance, doing things for others, but not expecting anything back in return. And what's our attitude about that? I know we have a ton of relationships and interactions where they have to be reciprocated. Things have to be reciprocated. I understand that. You can't have friendships, for instance, that are just like you give all the time and they receive all the time. That's a codependency. And there might be people in your life that is how you coexist with one another, but that's not a healthy relationship. Relationships are about give and take, and it's not like 50-50. There's no such thing as drawing it down the line, but it's this investment that you're meeting their needs when they need it, and they're meeting your needs when you need it, and you're just there for them, they're there for you, and you've got gifts and talents and time, and it's just you're trading it, or you're coming together, and it's this beautiful thing. But there were also those times where you're just doing something, where you're giving something to someone in need, and you just don't expect anything back. And that joy that you carry in your spirit, just knowing that you met someone's need at a very basic level, is an incredible feeling. And you don't need to, go on social media and talk about it all the time. First of all, like, protect those people. The world doesn't need to know that they have a deficit and you're meeting that deficit, because God, think about it when the tables are turned, and they will be turned. You will be in the need of something, of someone else. That's how humanity works. And then they're out there talking about it and broadcasting it. And if they're like not saying your name, like, everybody knows, because now they can put, these few little details together and realize, oh my God, you were the person that person was talking about, and they helped you. And then it starts to form like pity and all those wrong types of reactions to individuals. And so resist that temptation to have to be there all the time. That's, again, doing things for the wrong reason. So not only doing these acts of service expecting to get something back in return from them, that's a way of expecting to get something back. If you need to get attention and validation and a pat on the back and everybody clapping for you that you did it, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. It's not the right attitude. The best blessed types of acts are the ones that are done in private. And you just know, so if you have a divine connection, you just know, like, there's a whole other, like, feeling of pride that will swell within you, knowing that you did those right things and knowing who is actually watching. But the other thing I was thinking about also is, like, just like meeting the needs of others and being in the service of others, is this podcast that I do. There's a lot of times where my week is crazy and I'm doing all these other things right now, and the temptation was like, just go on a hiatus this week. Just say you can't come to this week. My allergies are going nuts on top of it all because the weather is changing. I'm not feeling it. And so, I was kind of like tempted, like, just take a break, just do it. And then I thought, no, like, have a good attitude about it and keep your commitments. So keep your commitments to others. And there will be times when you can't keep those commitments, but don't fall into that easy trap of, oh, well, there's no big deal. There's no, there's not a lot of skin in the game. It's like, keep that commitment. And I get as much out of these weekly podcasts as I hope you're getting, but I certainly get something. And I love that I have, come into this season in these topics that I'm talking to you about, that has really opened it up for me to also kind of be a student here doing the homework. I love that I'm thinking about these things and thinking about them all week and practicing the very things that I'm telling you to practice, things that I have done and that work. But sometimes we have the temptation, especially when we are, again, in the service of others, where we're using our gifts and our experience, our trials and errors, and then our successes. And we say, well, I've done that, like, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. But we forget that these are like continual things that we have to keep doing throughout our life. We don't just do it one and done, and then that's it. We didn't have to worry about that ever again. And so I think a few of these things that I have been coming back to are like, girl, why'd you stop doing these things? You know that they're vital to your best quality of life, but they're also vital to you, like, literally, getting through the day. They're vital to your survival too. So yes, we need to survive and we need to thrive. And sometimes we can neglect ourselves in areas that we know better by thinking, well, I've already taken care of that. I've already done that. Not thinking like it's a regular routine. We have to make these things a regular routine and regular activities and practices in our everyday life. And coming back to that, having a good attitude about it, I was thinking about when I was raising my kids, how many thankless things you do for your little ones. And I was thinking about like how many times like they needed help tying their shoes for the 10th time that day so they could go out. And just all of the little things, and they couldn't do it. And they would try to do it and you're teaching them how to tie their shoes, and the patience that it takes to not make people feel like a burden or like you're so irritated by having to do these things for them. That's a really interesting thing to think about. So pay attention to that in your own exchanges. Like, is your attitude good? I've had to check myself now. Like I was thinking about like how I learned a lot of that patience raising kids, but now my husband's going through some things right now. And I find this just the tendency to just be like so impatient and just be like, oh, come on already. And then I have to keep being like, you need to fix your attitude about this too. There's a time and place to be like, I'm not enabling that. I'm not doing that for you. You can still do that for yourself. But then there's also a time where it's like, if I say I'm going to help him with something, what's my attitude like while I'm doing it? Because again, that comes back to my spiritual well-being and my inner health and my character. So if I'm being squeezed and the character coming out of me is not the character that I want to exemplify, that's a me problem. And yes, there will be things outside of ourselves that push our buttons all day long. And there will be things that provoke you into stages of anger. And sometimes that is justified. But I'm talking about your everyday things and being in the service of others and thriving. They're thriving, you're thriving, everybody's benefiting. So your homework for this week is I want you to do a spiritual wellness check. Make a list of 3 to 5 things you already do to invest in your spirit self. So start there. Yes, write some stuff down. I don't care where you write it. Rate and note the quality of these things in your current everyday life. Notice anything that needs any TLC, mark that down. Then I want you to pick 1 or 2. Really, if you pick 2, I'm all for taking baby steps, but sometimes we take baby steps way too often. And so pick 1 to 2. Go ahead, be a little overambitious. After all, you're trying to improve your quality of spiritual life. So I want you to figure out 1 or 2 things that you want to be more intentional about strengthening or getting back to doing regularly. And then like we did last week, I want you to bring it into your weekly routine. Even if it's going outside of that to look some things up and to be like, is there some, trendy new ways, better improved ways and methods to do this or that, or just new ways. Maybe you just burn things out. I know I burn things out and you're like, I know that's kind of dormant right now in my life. I know I love the benefits. I know it's good for me, but I just can't do that one more time. I cannot stomach it. Well, of course you cannot stomach it. Go ahead, find something new to do and try. If that doesn't work, try something else. Like, don't just give up, because again, you're after the end goal of practice, routine, bringing these things in and knowing that they're for your good. So this is not like, I've got to eat my Brussels sprouts or my asparagus, blah, I hate them. Find another vegetable. Find another vegetable that does the same thing. No, you don't have to eat something that you absolutely hate just because it has good benefits for you. And then I want you to pay attention to how you begin to feel and function as you practice this spiritual activity or the activities. And note those things down, like write them down so that you can then look at the paper. I love this. This is so gratifying when you can look at the paper and you can kind of see like the problem things or the things that you had to do, and then you look at the results. So if you're checking things off the list or you're saying, oh, yes, I did this thing and this was a great outcome and this was a positive and this was a positive, give yourself that visual space, because that's also another way to release those good endorphins and feel good about yourself, which affect your body, mind, and spirit in different ways. And then next week, we'll take this body, mind, spirit conversation in the direction of certainty. So something that I promised we would tap into, we're finally going to get around there. And we're going to talk about certainty and how it informs clarity and is an empowering act of self-love.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, follow my channel and share it with friends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. And if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a one-on-one coaching session with me. Find a link in the show notes below to book a session. And as you go through your week, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.